In market news now, Asian shares wobbled in cautious trade while the dollar was firm ahead of a series of data releases and central bank meetings. That begins with the Reserve Bank of Australia, which took place, of course, earlier today. Overnight, the sale of First Republic Bank's assets to JP Morgan Chase resolved the third U.S. bank failure in 2 months. Meanwhile, Treasury yields rose in response and expectations firmed to near-term certainty for one final U.S. rate hike this week. Much of Europe also returns from the May Day holidays with final activity surveys due, preliminary inflation figures, as well as a survey of European bank lending that will be closely watched given the recent stresses in the sector. To give us some perspective on the markets, we are joined by Makwe Masilela from Makwe Fund Managers. Makwe, thank you so much for your time. So, given this backdrop that we come back to following the May Day holidays, how are you characterizing the local and global market sentiment?
After introducing the viewers, yes, it's a very short trading week, but there's a lot of investors to digest. Over the weekend, we had the Chinese manufacturing PMI numbers contracting, and that also had an impact on the price of oil, and also the U.S. regional bank collapsing, since March. And remember now, markets are looking ahead to U.S. interest rate decision tomorrow. That on Thursday we have to deal with that one coming from the ECB, bearing in mind that inflation in the Eurozone ticks slightly higher as expected in April. And also we have to deal with the U.S. job report numbers coming on Friday. And also not forgetting the results coming out of Apple on Thursday, because Apple is to be seen as a bellwether when it comes to global development. So yeah, markets have got a lot to digest. If that's not enough, then you get the likes of the U.S. Treasury Secretary saying the U.S. government could become unable to pay all of their bills on time as soon as the 1st of June if Congress doesn't raise the debt limit. So yeah, we started the week with that surprise, as you said in our intro, of that 25 basis point interest hike when it comes to Australia, because traders were expecting an extended course.
It's the 2nd of May, so when you look back at the month of April, what would you say was driving equity markets?
The oil share just for the month of April was up to 2%. We've seen the rent weekend almost 49 cents, which is almost 2.7%. And I think markets were mainly driven by expectations that the rate hikes will pause as inflation data was cooling. Remember, we had those nice numbers coming out of inflation. And remember also we had good earnings reports. And markets decided, to shrug off that banking crisis. So I think our hopes were pinned on, come what may, we expect the U.S. Central Bank to pause when it comes to interest rate hikes. And they are, by the way, a de facto leader when it comes to setting interest rates. So hopefully other central banks will follow suit if they decide to pause.
So as you mentioned in your initial response, we've got the Fed meeting tomorrow. And given the banking turmoil we've seen in the U.S. with another bank being rescued, what are you expecting tomorrow? Are you expecting the idea that perhaps from June we will see a pause? Are you expecting perhaps even when we look at the interest rate hiking cycle, are we at the end of it?
Your speculation is growing about the Fed's decision on halting rate hikes with a potential pause when it comes to June. And the impact of the Fed's decision on the dollar and treasuries will be important catalyst for moves across markets, and that includes your commodities like gold and oil. The problem here is we know the Fed is very adamant to fight inflation, and if the guys are not too convinced that at least the guys winning the war, most probably that June possibility might not come to fruition. But yes, market expectation that being a potential of a pause when it comes to June. And it only makes sense to give all these hikes some chance, to see and work themselves into the economy.
Over the past few weeks, or at least few months, given the environment that we find ourselves in, many analysts have come on the show, have spoken quite intensely about the idea of going defensive. Do defensive stocks work all the time in an environment like this?
Not necessarily. As an example, we've seen what happened to our hospital groups, when we had an environment which was not okay. We thought that they will benefit, but we forget that people had to do the opposite and cancel some of the voluntary treatment that they had to go for. So I'm saying it all depends from one situation to the other. Look what happened when it comes to the food retailers, which can be called sometimes they see the differences. It all depends about the cost of living. People might start buying less as much as they continue to buy. So yes, the point is not always that the difference in stocks will always drop.
On Thursday, we have retailer Pick n Pay that will be releasing their results. What will you be paying attention to when the financials come out?
I think the most important thing will be to see the cost of their spend, as we've seen that continues to be a new high cost when it comes to many operations, not just regular. Also, well, to see and maybe have a better understanding of their closing part of things, because that will help us to understand the way forward of Checkers as they started or piloted their stand-alone clothing shops. So I think that will be the most critical thing, because generally we still continue to expect an uptick as most people, or more than 50% of our people, continue to spend more than 50% of their money on food. So we expect to see some decent results.
Before I let you go, we touched on the Federal Reserve that is taking place tomorrow. Any other events that you are paying attention to for the rest of the week?
It's more of the ECB coming out with their decision on Thursday and the U.S. job report on Friday, and also the results that will be creating or coming out of April on Tuesday.
All right, Makwe, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. That is Makwe Masilela from Makwe Fund Managers. And of course, as he mentioned in the response, and as I've also included in my opening intro, we are expecting the Federal Reserve's interest rate decision. Markets pricing in one more 25 basis point hike, possibly a pause in June, but we'll be paying attention to that all-important press statement with Fed Chair Jerome Powell. However, that is it from me. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have more news for you, so stay tuned.